guest host for Point of View.
And welcome to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And we have got a dynamic show for you today. We're going to cover a number of topics that I think you're going to be interested in. Progressives are on a mission to change the way we vote. And one of those changes is called ranked choice voting. It has been tried in a few places, mostly smaller elections and political primaries, but New York City recently wanted to show the country how well this system would work in a bigger election, and it was a disaster. Joining us to talk about that for this half hour is John Fund. John is a national affairs columnist for National Review. He worked for the Wall Street Journal for more than 2 decades, where I met him back when he was at the Wall Street Journal. For several years, he was on the newspaper's editorial board. That was from 1995 to 2001. And he's written several books about several topics, but the one that I always focus in on is election fraud. He has covered election fraud in so many ways and is just one of the country's experts on that issue. He lives around the New York area and has for a long time. And so I wanted to bring him in to talk a little bit about this election in New York. John, thank you so much for joining us.
A pleasure. And, good luck trying to get your Texas legislators to fly back to work. They're hiding out inside the Beltway, having flown in on private jets to shirk their duty.
Isn't this interesting? I mean, we've got a national movement in Washington to end the Senate filibuster based upon the notion that the majority ought not to be impeded by the minority in a Congress. And yet, in Texas, we've got a minority, the Democrats in the state house, who have decided that they want to impede the majority and flee the state.
You couldn't have put it better. And what puts the icing on the cake, or maybe the de-icing, is they flew in these private jets to Washington. Well, even private jets are covered by the federal mask mandate. The pictures taken inside the jet in flight show none of the Democrats wearing masks. Instead, they're enjoying cases of beer, which coach passengers on commercial flights can't have yet.
Yes, you can't get past the hypocrisy. You can't make this stuff up. Well, tell us, what is ranked choice voting?
Ranked choice voting is a theory that people don't have enough choices on the ballot, so that a lot of people, they vote for a candidate and their vote is wasted. Well, if they rank choice their candidate, if they say this is my first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice, they'll have some influence who ultimately wins. There are 3 problems with this. One, there's no massive groundswell of support or calling for this. It's a theory out of the academic faculty lounges. 2, any election idea that takes more than 25 words to explain is probably a bad idea. This takes about 250 to 500 words to explain. So to cut things short, I'm going to go to the 3rd problem, which is it took a month for New York to count its votes. We have to live in the fast-moving 21st century. Everything is faster. I can get Amazon delivered in 2 hours in New York. In the rural areas, they can get it in 48 hours. And yet the only thing that slowed down in the last generation is our election results. They used to take a day. Now they take a month. This is not progress.
And it's not entirely clear. I mean, Eric Adams has been named the winner. I think they may be still waiting to sort of confirm that.
He's the winner.
But with all the various things that are going on, it struck me as it's a litigation nightmare. If you thought, for instance, this number 2 person or the number 3 person, that these false votes that got in of 135,000 that the elections board came back and said, we made a mistake, we'll take those back out. If you thought that created a problem, if you thought that somebody was in charge of this system that really wanted Eric Adams to win, you might have some legal grounds for challenging these things, and it'd take even longer than a month.
Look, my belief is that anything that interjects uncertainty and doubt and questions into an election hurts the credibility of the whole system, which hurts the credibility of anything the government does, and it undermines respect for the rule of law. is an academic hothouse idea. It's been tried in Minneapolis. It's brought horrible problems there. It's been tried in smaller cities. Horrible problems there. It's in San Francisco, my hometown. I can assure you that the only way to make San Francisco's government worse was to introduce ranked choice voting, and sure enough, it did make things worse.
So is there... do you think the New York failure is going to sort of diminish the demand for this thing, or do you think it will? I mean, I've seen some articles from people who support it saying, well, it took a little while to sort of get it figured out, but this was just a good trial run. We'll get it right next time.
Yes, and I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you. That's how much credibility that statement has.
Do you expect any lawsuits from the other candidates who might have felt like that in this process that goes over and over again? I mean, I agree with you. When you continue to delay this and you run these numbers through again and again, it at least opens the opportunity for somebody to create mischief if they want to.
I think that the other candidates will be prevailed upon to drop any potential lawsuits because it will hurt them in the future. It'll look like sour grapes. And, Adams is African American, and I think that would stir up a lot of resentment in some neighborhoods that people were trying to take over. Remember, we've only had one other African American mayor in New York, so I think there would be a lot of sensitivity on that point. The real question is for the rest of the country. I think New York is stuck with this for a while, but the rest of the country should basically say, you've shown us no reason to do this, and everywhere it's been tried, it leads to bizarre choices. For example, in Maine, there was an election in 2018. The Republican congressman who had a good record, had been reelected, is running for reelection. He wins the most votes, but he doesn't get 50%, so they go to ranked choice voting, and in the final ranked choice voting round, his opponent takes the lead and wins by a few votes. That confuses everyone and angers the people who thought, gee, I thought democracy meant the most votes you got, you win.
Only on the first round, but your point is well taken. Is that this becomes confusing, and you find voters who come out of a voting booth saying, "Well, I had three choices for president. I kind of got confused by that." Or remember the Chads in Florida? They got confused about the Chads in the 2000 election, and just people felt like they were maybe made a mistake, and that was part of the discussion afterwards. My guest for this next segment, John Fund. He is with National Review. I'd encourage you to go to National Review and read his pieces because he is one of the country's experts on election and voter fraud, which has become an issue. So when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about this New York election, but I also want to get John's take on some of the states and what they're doing to try to secure their elections and the Democratic pushback from it. So stay with us. We'll be back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Your children are facing an onslaught of profanity through the media. Movies are one place where profanity reigns. One survey has been tracking profanity in movies from the first swear word on film, the 1939 Gone with the Wind, to The Wolf of Wall Street, which holds the record with 798 swear words. There has been a 500% increase over these many decades. The Parents Television Council has documented that the fact that the number of expletives on television programs has doubled in just the last decade. Kids and adults use more profanity simply because they hear it more than ever before. So let's start with a definition. The word profane means to treat something that is sacred with abuse or contempt. It means to desecrate. Something profane is unholy. It is certainly not a positive attitude. So what does the Bible teach? Well, Paul says in Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. Colossians 3:8 says, rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Sometimes we hear young people say that it really doesn't matter what you say, it's only words. Well, words make a difference. Make a joke in public about a plane and see if words have consequences. As believers, we should submit our vocabularies to the Lord. The world is watching us. Peter admonishes us to keep our behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation. In a world awash in profanity, Christians should watch what they say. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back. My guest for this segment on Point of View is John Fund. He is national affairs columnist for National Review, and he is one of the country's leading experts on elections and especially election fraud. So, John, I listen to, I think virtually every day I hear some discussion on NPR or something about elections in the country, and they'll say there is no widespread election fraud, no evidence of widespread election fraud in the country. But then they move on to the notion, sort of just slide into to thinking or talking as if there is no election fraud in the country. And we do have election fraud, even if it's not always widespread.
Well, in most elections, we don't have to worry about it. But if you're in a close election in a swing state, like there were several swing states in the 2020 election, you do have to be concerned because people will put their thumb on the scale of democracy. There are also irregularities that have to do with simple incompetence. In Georgia, there was a lawsuit. It was never heard because of lots of people managed to stall the court hearing, but they found 29,000 voters who were either dead or had moved out of state or were college students who were voting twice, who were or felons or other people who were ineligible, non-citizens. Mm-hmm. And the margin in Georgia was 10,000 votes. Now, regardless of whether or not that was inadvertent confusion or incompetence or fraud, that's of concern because Georgia was one of the closer states. In addition, just, if you go to the Heritage Foundation's website, just type in elections, and you will see a database of 1,400 cases in which people have either been convicted or have pled guilty to voter fraud. 1,400 cases. And just today, a state senator in Connecticut, a state senator and a school board member in Bridgeport, Connecticut, were indicted on election fraud charges just today.
Mm. And, sometimes, and you sort of alluded to this, sometimes it is purposeful fraud, but sometimes it's just incompetence may be the right word. In some cases, confusion. But I think in New York 22, that finally got settled after months, wasn't it? They decided for the Republican candidate, but you had the Democrats were challenging that. I believe that some people had voted out of the right precinct and they were supposed to vote in their specific precinct and some other issues. What was happening there?
Well, that was probably simple incompetence caused by the fact that the left used the COVID pandemic as an excuse to change the way people vote in state after state. Using the excuse that people wouldn't be able to vote in person, they dramatically expanded mail-in balloting. Some states sent out a ballot to every person on the voter registration rolls, which is an open invitation to confusion and fraud. They changed election rules that election officials didn't have the time or the budget to adapt to, so they were charging a whole new system. And in the end, in New York, there was no overt fraud, although the Democrats actually claimed the computers were doing some end, it was massive confusion caused by a Governor Cuomo, who ordered these changes unilaterally using his emergency powers. The legislature was never consulted. That's how you're supposed to change rules, have the legislature change them, not have some czar change them. In the end, it was a 109-vote margin, and there's still people that got confused, and for over a month, the district was without representation because it took that long to sort it out in court.
Now, several states, in an effort to try to sort of, establish it, set statewide rules and so forth, I think these are mostly Republican states, are passing or have passed, are considering election reform laws. Texas, as you mentioned earlier, is one. Georgia has already done that. But the message from the left and from the media is this is all voter suppression and efforts to take away the right to vote. I believe President Biden is in Philadelphia today, I think, talking about the issue of voting and the accusing states of trying to just go to Jim Crow 2.0.
Well, anytime you have someone raising either Nazis or Jim Crow as their lead argument, you know they're probably over the top and ahead of their skis on the facts. Joe Biden giving the speech in Philadelphia is truly rich. He represented Delaware in the U.S. Senate, next door Delaware, for 36 years. Next door Delaware is a Democratic state, Democratic legislature, Democratic governor. Its early voting period is less than Georgia's new law. It does not allow for as much absentee voting as Georgia does. And Delaware allows you to challenge by shouting out the name of the person you're suspecting of fraud in the polling place. You know, in other words, you can literally humiliate and embarrass someone by saying, I challenge this person's right to vote. Georgia doesn't allow that. So if Joe Biden wants to complain about voter suppression, maybe he should go to his friends in Delaware, and I think he still has a lot of them, and have them change their laws first before they have the federal government Bigfoot it into Georgia and basically nationalize the elections in a one-size-fits-all policy.
I think Karl Rove highlighted that in one of his columns in the Wall Street Journal, but that's actually true in several states. Some of the people who are complaining the most about election suppression are from states where the rules are even stricter than they are in some of the states that are trying to reform their laws.
When Major League Baseball pulled out one of its games from Atlanta and moved to Denver, they were moving to a state that had more restrictive ballot access and ballot laws than most of the changes in Georgia.
It's amazing. And you get from this, because I was listening to the radio this morning and they were talking about the law in Texas that is trying to move through the legislature, may not be able to because of Democrats fleeing the state. But one of the things is it was going to ban 24-hour voting, and it was 24-hour voting, as far as I know, only happened in one area, one county, and that is in the Houston area for one time during this past election as a response to try to help people with during the COVID outbreak. It is not like we're changing something that's been around forever and that we're trying to change that. It's just simply saying you can't do it in one place.
Well, Texas has 256 counties. Imposing a rule that was decided temporarily to be appropriate for one county where Houston is and applying it to the whole rest of the state doesn't make sense. The law should be uniform as much as possible. People should vote under the same set of rules. And that's all that happened. Of course, this Texas shuffle, the Texas, Great Escape, it's not about voting rights, Merrill. The real story is they're worried, the Democrats, about the legislature in a special session tackling redistricting, which they have to do every 10 years after the census. Because the legislature is Republican and the governor is Republican, it's going to be a Republican map. So they hope by staying away, basically forcing the legislature into a situation where they can't vote on a new redistricting map, they hope to throw it to the federal courts where they'll get a better map. This is pure politics. It's not about voting rights. It's about them saving their jobs as incumbent members of the state legislature.
And maybe about a vacation in Washington, D.C., paid by somebody else.
It's so appropriate that Texans who value individuality and independence and all of that, what's the place they run to? They run to inside the Beltway and go into their hiding places. This is not Texas behavior. It's Beltway behavior.
So where should people go if they want to find out? You've got a couple of books out there. I don't know that if you've done one recently, but if people want to find out.
I have a new one coming out in October.
Ah, perfect. So we'll have to have you back in October.
Pre-ordered at Amazon. I highly recommend it, and others who know a lot about the subject also recommend it. It's called Our Broken Elections, and it's by me and Hans von Spakowski of the Heritage Foundation. And you just go to Amazon and look it up. And, of course, you can also search my articles on nationalreview.com. You know,
a little while back, a few weeks ago, I went to look to find a place that compared voting voting statutes by state. Sometimes the National Conference of State Legislators and groups like that will do something like that where they compare certain laws in various states. And I wanted to look at the voting restrictions, but I didn't find anything. All I found was things from the Brennan Center, which would typically be more liberal, and I think the ACLU has one. Is there any place where listeners can go just to compare the sort of the voting restrictions and the rights and abilities and so forth versus states? Are you aware of anything like that?
I'm not sure if the Heritage Foundation has exactly what you mentioned, but they have a comprehensive entire section of their website on voting reform and voting laws. Just go to the Heritage Foundation's website, heritagefoundation.org. Go to the search box and put in election laws, and there'll be a rich trove of stuff you can parse through, and you probably will find what you're looking for.
John, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate all your work, and we will have you back in October when that new book comes out.
Thanks so much, Merrill. Good luck with Point of View. I've been appearing on it for 20 years, and it's a great audience.
You have. You've been a long-time guest on here. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
And when we come back from the break, we're going to turn to David Keene to talk about a hoax commencement speech that was imposed upon him and John Lott. Stay with us, and we'll be back in just a minute.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back. Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. And we were talking in the last half hour with John Fund. He is with National Review and is just an expert on elections. And we want to go this hour to David Keene. Now, recently, some anti-gun activists pulled a political stunt. They invited two prominent conservative voices on gun issues and invited them to come to Nevada to give a commencement speech, which they did. Problem was, it was all a hoax. One of those invitees was John R. Lott, and the other was our guest for this next two segments, David Keene. David is the recent past editorial editor for the Washington Times and the opinion editor, and he left that, retired from that not long ago. But he's a longtime advisor to presidents, a champion of personal liberty, and he was for decades the chairman of the American Conservative Union, and he was also president of the National Rifle Association. He was the other person that these people invited to come speak in Nevada at a commencement address, and I think he's with us now. David, are you with us?
I sure am.
David, so good to have you back. Longtime friend. It's been a little while since we talked, but thank you for joining us.
That's okay. I was just on a trout stream, and I came off just to talk to you.
The fish are glad, I suspect.
Well, I don't know. They're smarter than I am.
That's one of the reasons why I've never gone fishing. Or I have, but I've never done it much. Now, tell me, John R. Lott told his story in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago. Tell us about your story.
Well, it was. These folks must have not have much to do, but they apparently have a good bit of money to do it with. I received a letter on the letterhead of the school calling itself the James Madison Academy in Las Vegas. I checked them out. They had a web page, and they had endorsements and records and all this stuff on the internet.
They had all the web page up there for you if you were going to go check them out. It was there.
Oh yeah, no. I did the due diligence on that, and it all appeared to be legitimate. And they said that they were a online high school that worked with homeschooling and the rest, and that they had several thousand students, and that they had a constitutional focus, as a number of these schools do, and that each year that they focused on a different part of the Constitution, and that this year the students focused on the Second Amendment, which is why they were inviting me to come to speak to the commencement. Now, as you know, Merrill, throughout my career, I've made a point of always talking to young people whenever I can.
Yes, indeed.
And so,
and the American Conservative Union, when you did CPAC, y'all brought in hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of young people.
Exactly. So I said, well, I could fit this into my schedule, and they said, we'll fly you and your wife out first class and put you up at the Bellagio, and then do this. And then they said they had to test the sound system and all this, and to do a rehearsal of the commencement. So I said, fine. We did that, and then that night they called and said the police have said there are security concerns, so we're having to call it off and do it all virtually. So we enjoyed our evening in Las Vegas and flew home. They never said anything. And when I got home and wanted to check to see that everything was all right, I emailed them, and nothing was deliverable. Everything had been changed. The web page had been taken down, and then they advertised this. They never notified me in any way, and they spent a lot of money on this thing, not just to fly us out, not just to put us up at the Bellagio, but they had the whole set up with sound and 3,000 chairs and all this sort of thing.
Yeah, they had 3,000 chairs spaced apart, I think, wasn't it? So that it was.
That's exactly right.
And there was nobody in the chairs.
There was nobody there because it was the rehearsal. They were going to be there the next day, and of course they weren't. So it was all a scam, a pretty expensive scam for for not much gain because there's no substantive value to it. And so I just laughed it off. I mean, I thought I've been fooled by smarter people than you in the past, so it didn't bother me, but it illustrates two things. One, this debate is sort of a holy war, not a substantive policy debate. Anti-gun people, pro-gun control people have almost consistently refused to engage in a substantive debate. They're involved more in name-calling. They're involved in trying to belittle their opponents. And they're involved in spending a lot of money to make very minor points. This thing had to have cost $10,000-$20,000 in total. And I guess that Mike Bloomberg and those folks don't mind spending money on little jokes. So it illustrates in some ways the nature of the discussion or non-discussion of many issues today, and the sort of tribal opposition to those who are not in your tribe and don't accept all your views. So you want to make fun of them. Well, that's fine. If it cost them $20,000 to have a little joke at my expense, it didn't bother me much.
So what was the point of it? I mean, did they create a video out of this? Or what was the point?
They filmed the rehearsal, and I guess I've never seen it. Then they cut pieces out of the speech, out of my remarks, and put them together in a video, which they put up on the internet somewhere. I didn't even bother to go look at it because I really didn't care.
And they wanted you talking about the Second Amendment, right? And
I mostly talked. I mean, it was a commencement speech. I mostly talked about James Madison and the challenge to young people, because that was the audience, and I said that that they had their futures ahead of them. That they were grounded in the Constitution because of the education they got, and there was no limit to the aspirations they could achieve. And I used Madison as an example. You remember Madison was, first of all, a little guy. Mm-hmm. He had asthma all of his life and maybe epilepsy. He probably was bullied by the senior classmates when he was in school, but he went on to become the father of the Constitution. And I said, if he can do that then, you can do whatever you want now. And that's always been my message to young people, not relating necessarily to Madison, but I believe that the young people should dream big dreams and then pursue them. And that was really my message. But a part of it was about the Second Amendment, but that was maybe a quarter or 20% of the speech.
Democrats keep trying to push gun control legislation, and they haven't had much success in it. What do you see happening on the horizon there?
Well, in order to achieve what they want, except via executive order, and just what the Biden administration is trying to do is just say words that meant one thing last year mean something else this year, and therefore existing laws can be reinterpreted to cover things they were never intended to cover. But except for that, and that's going to be challenged in the courts and in Congress, in order to achieve their goals, they needed desperately to knock down the filibuster in the Senate, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. They're going to try other things, but as this goes on, as happened last time, and as you mentioned, I was president of the NRA. I was president during the Obama administration's assault on gun rights, and when that began, everybody thought that they were going to achieve much of what they were after. In the end, they achieved nothing. And all of their proposals failed. And they failed for two reasons. One is that when the debate takes place and goes on, the public and those lawmakers who are in the middle look at the crucial question that we asked then and ask now. If all of your proposals were in place, would they have prevented any of these things? And the answer is always no, but we want to do something. Well, what they want to do is blame gun owners and blame firearms rather than criminals and crazy folks and terrorists for the acts that go on in a society. So that doesn't make much sense to people eventually. And secondly, as I've said time and again, deep in the DNA of the American people is the belief and that the firearms, individual ownership of firearms for self-defense, to defend one's family, oneself, and one's property and one's community and nation is so ingrained in the American psyche that when you come up against it, you hit a stone wall. I don't know if in today's classrooms they teach that the shots fired at the Concord Bridge that began the revolution were fired because the British were coming not after the guns, because they were in every farmer's and citizen's home, but after the ammunition. They knew they had to disarm the populace to win. Americans know that. Americans know that the right to self-defense is an inherent right. And that's reflected, Merrill, as you know, in the Constitution. I wrote a book some time ago, and I called it Shall Not Be Infringed. And if you read the Second Amendment, it's clear that the founders were not saying, we are granting you the right to own firearms. What they were saying was, we know you have the right to own firearms, and we don't want a government that will infringe on those rights. All of that together is why they don't succeed and won't succeed this time.
Stay with us, and we'll be right back.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to our final segment with David Keene, former opinion editor of the Washington Times, longtime chairman of the American Conservative Union, which hosts the CPAC convention that was just in Dallas. But David was the star of those things for years and years and years, and then former past president of the National Rifle Association. So, David, let me ask you about the NRA. The NRA has long been considered one of the most powerful lobbying groups in Washington, at least that's how the media portrays it. But the NRA has hit some bumps over the past few years. What's going on with the NRA right now, and where is it? Is it still the force it used to be?
Oh, it sure is. NRA membership is continuing to go up, and it's going up, Merrill, in part because gun owners, whether they're NRA members or not, and believers in the Second Amendment, know that they're under fire, and probably the greatest assault or attempted assault on their rights since the 1968 Gun Control Act under Lyndon Johnson. So they're joining the NRA. They're contributing. The NRA is flush. We focused in the last election cycle on state legislatures and on congressional candidates that were pro-Second Amendment, and rather than on the presidency, because these days presidential campaigns cost $1 billion, you know, and if you can put in $50 million from your members, you don't even get a ticket to the inaugural. The real impact that we had this time around was in the congressional and state legislative elections, and we've been winning case after case in the courts. We're moving our operations to Texas. We were incorporated in the 1870s in New York. Mm-hmm. And I blame our current problems on Ulysses S. Grant and General Philip Sheridan because they were founding presidents of the NRA and did not have the foresight to know that New York was going to turn bad in 150 years. But the Attorney General of New York had declared during her campaign that if she was elected, she would destroy the National Rifle Association. And she's been attempting to do that. She alleged that we're in violation of some parts of their thousands of regulations to nonprofits, and that we should be disbanded, and she should get all the money and be able to distribute it to the charities of her choice. That's not going to happen. The American Civil Liberties Union jumped in on our side at the very beginning, saying you can't do this to people on technicalities just because you don't happen to like them. Mm-hmm. We decided to try and end the legal fight earlier this year by using the bankruptcy laws, which is legal to do, and some companies do it, not because we were bankrupt, because in fact we were flush and able to pay all our creditors, but to reincorporate outside New York to end the millions of dollars in legal fees we've had to pay to put up with all this stuff. The judge in Texas praised much of what the NRA has been doing in terms of its organization, but said that he was reluctant to pull the jurisdiction from another state, which we knew was the problem. But we're moving to Texas anyway, and we'll then continue to fight the New York authorities in their home state where we have to. She's admitted that her goal is very, very unlikely, but in the course of the next year or year and a half, she can cost us a lot of money in legal fees. Now, this isn't new to the NRA. This is probably the most direct challenge we've had. But anti-gun people around the country know that in order to achieve their goals, they have to marginalize, demonize, or eliminate the National Rifle Association. You'll remember when Barack Obama came out with his gun control thing, he said the National Rifle Association used to be a powerful organization. It isn't anymore. And he found out that was wrong because it isn't our Washington headquarters. It isn't the money we raise. That's all necessary. It isn't our lobbyists. It's our 5 million members. And if most congressmen, most senators, realize that there are thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of NRA members in their districts and states, and when push comes to shove, those members make a difference. The reason the NRA has always been powerful on these issues is because our members, Republicans and Democrats and whatever, are willing to cross party lines when they know that the Second Amendment's at risk and vote for candidates that support the Second Amendment, and in the reverse, against candidates and incumbents that don't. That's clear in the minds of every legislator. So there are some in safe districts who will go safe Democratic districts because this has become a partisan issue, not in the minds of people, but in the minds of the parties, because the Democrats have treated firearms legislation the way they treated abortion back in the 70s and 80s. You can't be a good Democrat if you're for firearms freedom and the Second Amendment, at least not at the national level. But about 30% of our members are Democrats. And even those who ascribe to the national Democratic view that guns ought to be abolished and are reluctant to vote when they know that thousands of their members are going to take it out on them at the ballot box. That's where the power of the National Rifle Association comes from. Not from the money, not from the organization, not from the name, not from the lobbyists, but from the 5 million members and those who follow those 5 million members' lead on gun-related questions.
You know, during Barack Obama's time, the sale of guns and ammunition exploded at times, and my understanding is that's the case again. That it's almost, even before the pandemic started, it was almost impossible to buy ammunition because anytime some comes out, somebody buys it up.
Well, in the last year, according to the figures that are maintained, 10 million gun purchasers were first-time gun buyers. That's 10 million more Americans. Today, in one form or another, every one of the 50 states has some version of concealed carry legislation. In the 60s and 70s, there were 2 states that did. And every day, more and more people take to the gun range, take to the field. For the first time in decades during the pandemic, hunting license sales went up. So the belief among Americans that firearms are part of their rights and that the private ownership of firearms is a right under the Constitution is growing, not diminishing. And so at this point, the Biden administration is really confronting a headwind when they try and do what they want to do. That's why they know they have to eliminate the filibuster. They have to do more than that. These people are not stupid. They are attempting to pass anti-Second Amendment legislation that they know will create a backlash. So they want to change the election laws to help them avoid the backlash at the polls. And they also know that much of what they're proposing would be struck down by the courts. And that's where you get the proposal to change the court system by packing the Supreme Court. It seems to me that that those proposals, which are all of a cloth, are not going to pass. And they're going to pay a price for what they're doing at the polls in the off-year election coming up.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining us. It is and explaining all that. I haven't heard much about the NRA lately, but you certainly revealed that. And of course, you mentioned the number of new people who are buying guns, and I think that same survey found that a number of women and minorities have increased in their purchase of guns. So,
actually, the biggest, I guess, percentage increase would be Black Americans.
Yeah,
they live in these cities. When somebody says we're going to defund the police, they know exactly what they have to do. They have to have the ability to protect themselves. They have to have the ability to protect their families. And so they purchase firearms and get training to use them for self-defensive purposes. And women are a third or more of the new gun purchasers, and that's for the same reason. They want to be able to defend themselves when the police aren't there.
David, thanks so much for joining us. We'll let you get back to your trout fishing.
That's a good idea.
Bad news for the trout. Thank you, sir. Stay with us. We'll be back.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, your guest host for Point of View.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews with the Institute for Policy Innovation, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. You're going to want to hear this segment. One of the most important issues facing the country right now is border security. We hear from the media and the Biden administration that this is a challenge, but it's not really a crisis. Vice President Kamala Harris went to El Paso recently to do her border trip that she was getting so much pressure for not having done, but failed to actually hit the hot spots on the border. So to find out what's really going on the border, to try to get through all the stuff we're hearing from the media, we're going to turn to Brandon Judd. He has served as a Border Patrol agent for the last 22 years, and he's president of the National Border Patrol Council and has been since March 2013. He's testified before Congress many times as an expert witness, and he's appeared on Fox News, several media outlets. He's written op-eds for USA Today, The Hill, Real Clear Politics, Washington Times, and Fox News National. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us.
Merrill, it's good to be with you. Thank you.
You know, it's hard to wade through what's going on with the media and the Biden administration, because I'm in Texas. We see the problems arising from this Border Patrol issue, the border security. The Governor Abbott is adamant about trying to address this problem. President Trump was adamant about trying to address this issue, but now we've got a new administration in. It doesn't seem to recognize a problem, and has it been exacerbating the problem? Tell us what's actually happening on the border right now.
Well, it's really disappointing that the mainstream media isn't willing to tell the American public the whole truth. I don't care whether the public agrees with me, if they don't agree with me. What I do care about is that we're able to have an honest conversation, that the mainstream media reports the facts and then lets people make up their own opinions after that. And that's what's so disappointing about this. And when you hear the Obama administration downplay what's actually taking place on the border and having the mainstream media run with that instead of fact-checking, again, that becomes extremely disappointing, and it does a disservice to the American public in this country.
A couple of months ago, the media were covering the fact that we're hitting sort of record border crossings and captures. They did it for a little bit, but then I guess they got tired of it and went on. But my understanding is we're still at really high, if not record high numbers.
We are at record high numbers, and that's the thing that the American media is just not telling you. What they're going to do is they're going to listen to extreme snippets of talking points, such as this is a challenge, it's not a crisis. And when we talk about something that's a challenge, it's something that can be overcome. A crisis isn't something that we can overcome without taking drastic measures, and that's where we're at right now. If you look at the numbers, when the mainstream media says, well, the numbers were just as bad in the late 1990s, early 2000s. What they're not telling you is they're talking about a fiscal year. And the first 3 months of this fiscal year was under the Trump administration. So those numbers were down under the Trump administration, and they jumped up. So if you take it by calendar year, if you take it from the time that President Biden was inaugurated, we have never seen numbers like what we're seeing right now. And it's not just the number of apprehensions, and that's a good barometer of what's taking place, but it's also the number of people that are able to cross the border illegally and evade apprehension, and that's at record numbers as well. So when you put everything together, we have added more than 500,000 illegal aliens to our population since President Biden has been in office. It took 35 years to add 11 million people to our population, but in a short 5 months, it's been over 500,000. That is astronomical, and I don't know what more could be a crisis if you look at those numbers.
The people who are not being apprehended, I assume they're just filtering in through the country, being trafficked to one place or another, and so they're just working into the country and will never go through the court system, at least for a while.
We don't know who they are. We don't know where they came from. And we don't know what their intentions are. What we do know is that they're spreading out throughout this entire country. They're going to Iowa. They're going to Florida. They're going to New Mexico. They're staying in New Mexico. They're going throughout this entire country. And again, that's the scary point to this, is we don't know who they are. But what we do know is we know that the cartels take extreme measures to ensure that these individuals do not get apprehended. So you have to assume that a lot of these people that are crossing the border illegally and are evading apprehension, that they have criminal records. We know that the number of people that we're arresting right now, we're on record paces for the number of criminal aliens that we're apprehending. So those people that are getting away, that is the scariest part to this equation for me and for the agents that I represent.
The media tend to want to focus on the triangle, Honduras, Guatemala, and so forth, in Mexico. But I think you're apprehending people who are from other countries that not even south of us.
Well, the United Nations identifies 195 countries. They officially identify 195 countries on this planet. We're apprehending people from over 151 of those countries. So when the Biden administration wants to say, well, we want to go to the Northern Triangle to address the root cause, well, the root cause is right here in the United States. If the root cause was only in the Northern Triangle in Mexico, well, those would be the only countries that we're apprehending people from. We're apprehending people from all over the world, from China, from Haiti, from Cuba, from Middle Eastern countries. We're apprehending people from the former Soviet Union, from countries like Uzbekistan. We're apprehending people from all over the world. This is not just a Northern Triangle problem.
Are these people that you're apprehending, are they different than people who just walk across and say, I want to make a petition to enter the country because I'm under duress, my country's a mess? So they're those who are trying to come across and go through the process, are you making a distinction there?
No, that's what's very disappointing about Vice President Harris going to El Paso. She went to one of the locations that's more secure. If she wanted to go to a section of the border where people are actively trying to evade apprehension, she would have went to the Tucson sector in Arizona. If she wanted to go to the location where we have the vast number of people that are crossing the border illegally and just throwing their hands in the air saying, hey, here I am, come take me into custody, that would be RGV. El Paso is one of our largest sectors, but if you look at the numbers across the board in El Paso, they're way down compared to, say, Tucson, Arizona, or the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, or even Del Rio in Texas.
Well, it's an amazing problem that the media is missing. Stay with us. My guest for this half hour is Brandon Judd. He is, I think, 22 years with the Border Patrol and the head of their national council, and he's giving us the facts about what is happening on the border, something we're not hearing from the media. When we come back, we want to find out about what's happening with some of the illegal groups that are coming across, where the Biden administration is holding these, because Biden is shipping these people all over the country as well, and what we might be able to do about this. So stay with us. We'll be back with Brandon Judd in just a minute.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Your children are facing an onslaught of profanity through the media. Movies are one place where profanity reigns. One survey has been tracking profanity in movies from the first swear word on film, the 1939 Gone with the Wind, to The Wolf of Wall Street, which holds the record with 798 swear words. There has been a 500% increase over these many decades. The Parents Television Council has documented that the fact that the number of expletives on television programs has doubled in just the last decade. Kids and adults use more profanity simply because they hear it more than ever before. So let's start with a definition. The word profane means to treat something that is sacred with abuse or contempt. It means to desecrate. Something profane is unholy. It is certainly not a positive attitude. So what does the Bible teach? Well, Paul says in Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. Colossians 3:8 says, rid yourselves of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. You know, sometimes we hear young people say that it really doesn't matter what you say, it's only words. Well, words make a difference. Make a joke in public about hijacking a plane and see if words have consequences. As believers, we should submit our vocabularies to the Lord. The world is watching us. Peter admonishes us to keep our behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation. In a world awash in profanity, Christians should watch what they say. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. Our guest for this final segment is the Border Patrol agent Brandon Judd. He's been a Border Patrol agent for 22 years and is president of the National Border Patrol Council. He's been president since March 2013, and we're talking about that. If you'd like to call and express your opinion on what's happening at the border of our country, I'm going to open up the phone lines for the next segment, 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212 if you'd like to call and express your opinion, or if you want to mention something about John Fund that we had on earlier talking about election fraud and the election in New York. So, Brandon, there's a increasing awareness that you've got human traffickers who are processing these people, getting them across, making a lot of money from this. I'm beginning to think that Joe Biden is the human trafficker's best friend, because so many people have come across, and yet the Biden administration has been shipping these people around the country. They're doing it themselves. Do you expect that a lot of these people will actually show up for their court dates when those finally emerge?
No, historically speaking, the vast majority do not. They will show up to portions of their court hearings. So we got to understand that this is, when you cross the border illegally and you claim asylum, you're going to have more than just one court appearance. You're going to go to court for a couple times, and the burden of proof is on these individuals to prove that that where they're coming from, they fall under certain categories for relief here in the United States. And what's also interesting about this, and the American public doesn't understand, is that relief is only supposed to last as long as that condition exists in that country. So let's just say Guatemala, and we'll use Guatemala because we've got a lot of people coming from Guatemala. But let's say that they're coming to our country because they're saying that they're fleeing religious persecution. And let's say in 5 years from now that religious persecution goes away. Well, those individuals that came here during that period of time, they're then supposed to go back to their country because that condition doesn't exist. But that doesn't happen. When people come here to the United States and they come here illegally, they're never leaving this country. They don't go back. And so, the laws are being violated. The loopholes in our immigration system are being exploited. Our laws are being violated, and people just don't care about the laws. And when you look at this current administration, and when you look at, and if you will, let's just say what it is, when you romanticize crime, when you go after the police officers, when you go after the Border Patrol agents, when you go after the ICE officers, what that does is that sends a clear message to criminals that what they're doing is going to be justified. It's going to be okay. And when you do that, you're going to see crime increase exponentially, and that's what we're seeing in this country today.
Are the sanctuary cities still an issue? Some of them have said we're not going to cooperate with ICE or Border Patrol or anybody if they're wanting to try to come and take people who are here illegally. Is that still an issue out there?
It is an issue, but this administration has made it a lot worse. And the reason that they've made it worse is because they have, under what we call prosecutorial discretion, which is legal. Under prosecutorial discretion, this administration has said that unless it is a violent crime, ICE is not going to be able to take people in custody. So even if there are cities in this country, and there are a lot of cities that want to cooperate with ICE, even if they want to cooperate, ICE isn't going to be able to go pick them up under what is dubbed prosecutorial discretion. So a city like, and I know that Chicago isn't going to do it, but let's use Chicago because it's crime-ridden right now. So even if Chicago picks up, a police officer in Chicago picks up an illegal alien for driving drunk, and that police officer then contacts ICE, ICE isn't even going to be able to go pick that person up because that's not a violent crime. It doesn't fall under that prosecutorial discretion. So even if you have cities that want to cooperate with ICE, President Biden has made it to where they can't do it. ICE can't go pick them up. So he's, in effect, made every single city in this country a sanctuary city.
Just give a difference between between President Trump's policies and Joe Biden's policies and how the change has become, I guess, a magnet for people.
So the main issue that we have to look at, and let's be honest, President Trump's administration, they had a difficult time getting illegal immigration under control. The reason they had a difficult time is because Congress refused to work with them. President Trump came in and he wanted to work with Congress. He wanted to get laws passed that would close these asylum loopholes once and for all. Because Congress wouldn't work with him, the cartels recognized that they could still cross their products illegally into the United States, and they did. That's when President Trump worked out deals with Mexico, and that was the migrant protection protocols. And then he was also working out deals with the Northern Triangle countries. And what he effectively did is he ended catch and release. Anybody that crossed the border illegally and asked for asylum, he said, you have a right to do that, but you're going to wait in Mexico until your court cases come up. And that ensured that people would actually show up to their court cases, that they wouldn't be released into the United States just to disappear into what President Obama coined the shadows of society. He ensured that an orderly immigration process was going to take place, a legal immigration process was going to take place, and the Biden administration completely and totally got rid of all of those effective policies that allowed Border Patrol agents to actually secure the border.
And how did the illegals coming across sort of take advantage of Biden's position on minors?
Well, so when you look at, first off, the Title 42 was one of the other policies that the administration, it came from the CDC, but the CDC was under the Trump administration at the time. The CDC passed a health code that said that anybody that crosses the border illegally due to the COVID pandemic would be expelled immediately back to the country where they came from. Well, the Biden administration came in and they made carve-outs for these Title 42s, such as family units with children under the age of 6. Unaccompanied children wouldn't be subject to Title 42. People from countries like Venezuela wouldn't be subject to Title 42. And so what happened is once he made these cutouts, that's exactly what we saw crossing the border illegally. We saw a huge increase in family units with children under the age of 6. We saw a huge increase of unaccompanied children that were crossing the border illegally. We also saw a huge increase in countries that President Biden gave this carve-out to. So that's how we know, and there's the evidence right there that shows that when you can exploit our immigration laws, they will do it. These cartels, these criminal organizations, they go into the countries, they advertise their products, and they tell people exactly what they need to do to exploit our laws, and they do it.
How much does it cost? If I'm coming across illegally, how much do I have to pay a coyote or human trafficker to get me across?
There's a number of factors that will determine that. Age will determine that. The country that you're coming from. So if you're coming from China, you're paying upwards of $35,000 to come to the United States illegally. If you're coming from the Northern Triangle, you're paying around $4,000, somewhere around there. It could be a little bit more. It could be a little bit less. But that's another huge problem. And another thing that disappoints so many people is you have Democrats that are out there saying, well, we care about people. We care about people, and Republicans don't care about people. But that's all lip service. In rhetoric alone, yeah, they claim to care about people, but in actual actions, they do not, because what they're doing by allowing cartels to exploit the loopholes, they are encouraging people, children, women, to put themselves in the hands of these dangerous cartels. These women and children, they're abused on their way up here. They're regularly raped. They're physically abused, and even sometimes they're murdered. And it's because the policies of this country is allowing these criminal cartels to go in and advertise their services. So if you look at it, you have to ask yourself, by action, do these people that claim to care, the Bidens of the world, do they really care about people? Because their actions clearly show that they do not.
Brandon, we're down to about a minute. Can you take 30 seconds to tell us what you would do? What's the fix here?
The main fix is the public has to make a cry to their elected officials. The more people that tell their elected officials that they are not going to reelect them unless they do something about this, the more likely we have a chance of actually getting this under control.
I'm not optimistic, but I wish we would. But maybe the next election will put enough pressure upon Democrats to actually force something to happen. Thank you so much for joining us.
It was good to speak with you. Thank you.
Our guest for that segment was Brandon Judd. He has been a Border Patrol agent for 22 years and president of the National Border Patrol Council for about 8 years. If you want to find out more about him, you can go to the Point of View website, pointofview.net, and we have information about him there, also about David Keene and John Fund. 1-800-351-1212 if you'd like to join us and express your opinion on what's happening at the border. We'll be back in just a minute.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View radio talk show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @Point of View RTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, your guest host for Point of View.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Merrill Matthews, sitting in for Kirby Anderson today. 1-800-351-1212, 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to call and express your thoughts on some of the topics of the day, we had John Fund of National Review on in the first hour, talking about the elections in New York, and especially the ranked choice voting that is being pushed by progressives as a new way way to try to ensure democracy. That created just a mess in New York in that election for the primary for the mayor's race. But we also talked about election fraud and what was happening in Texas as Democrats flee the state to try to keep Texas from voting on an election integrity bill. And Governor Abbott has said when they come back in the states, they will be arrested and impounded and kept in a place until they do their job. Interesting to see if that happens. We also talked to Brandon Judd. He's been for nearly 24 years a Border Patrol agent and head of one of the associations, the Border Patrol Agent Association, talking about what's happening in the in the border states and the illegal immigration that has been going on. It has just been a mess since President Biden came in, and the media they covered it some and they highlighted it some, but I think it was mostly because they were shamed into doing it, because Republicans were coming down and highlighting what was going on. One of the state congressmen, Democrat in Texas, was highlighting this and releasing video of some of the places where children were being kept. And remember, it was a big issue when President Trump was in office. The media wanted to go down and highlight what was happening to children and how cruel he was for doing this. Similar situation under President Biden, and nobody seems to care very much. Congressman Cuellar was releasing those videos that had been sent to him, and that sort of shamed the media into doing some coverage of it. So they did a little due diligence to go down there and say we cover it, but they're not really talking about it now. Kamala Harris, the vice president, went to El Paso to talk about it. She went to one of the safest places she could go where it's not really an issue, as Brandon Judd pointed out. So we've got challenges on those. And I just published a piece on IPI, Institute for Policy Innovation, at IPI.org. If you're interested, I think it will be up. If it's not up now, it will be up soon. But we were just releasing this. And this was something I've been following for the last few weeks. And it has to do with the media's concerns about about vaccine and who is objecting to getting the vaccines. And so this is the COVID-19 vaccine, and I'm hearing a number of media stories where they're stressing that conservatives and others are pushing back against vaccinations. President Biden was not able to hit his goal of 70% vaccinated by the 4th of July. He wasn't far from it. I thought it was actually a bit of an overreach then, because there are a fair number of people in the country who just generally avoid vaccines. That's true with flu vaccine and other things. If you look at the national statistics, about 45% of the population will get a flu vaccine. A higher percentage of adults, of older adults. In the 60s, it's more like 55, I think 60%. In the children, it's more in the 30s. It's just we've always had people who just simply don't go and get the flu vaccine, even though it's available and it's not very expensive. So I always thought there would be a percentage who were pushing back against that. But now what's happened with the media is they're saying that the problem is that conservatives, anti-vaccination proponents and others are simply saying there's problems with this, there are things to worry about, there can be side effects and so forth. Some of that is true. Just for my own sake, I went out as soon as I was able to get the vaccine. I went out to do that. Not everybody wants to do that, and I understand that. But what's interesting to me is the media are painting conservatives as being vaccine resistors now, when in fact, prior to the election, prior to November 3rd, it was the Democrats who were the vaccine resistors. They were raising all kinds of questions about whether or not the vaccine was going to be trustworthy, whether you could trust it to do the job, was Donald Trump pushing it through too quickly, and raising a number of concerns about this. And I would argue that they fed into that concern about the vaccine. And so you haven't seen many stories about that. Back on October 6th, Newsweek published one with the headline, "Anti-Vaxxers Feed Off Democrat Skepticism of the COVID Vaccine." And so I pulled a number of the quotes from that article. And again, this was October 6th, so this was a month before the election. And so I'm reading from the article on this was Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York. Quote, on September 24th, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo said the state will independently review all vaccines authorized by the federal government. And now it's quote Andrew Cuomo, frankly, I'm not going to trust the federal government's opinion, and I wouldn't recommend New Yorkers based on that to do so based upon the federal government's opinion, he said in a statement. And then his spokesperson, Richard Azzopardi, had this to say: what we don't trust is a federal government that has been caught red-handed multiple times, circumventing the health experts and making political decisions seemingly to boost the president's re-election chances. Now, you'd be forgiven if you thought that was actually coming from somebody now, because, in fact, you get the impression that President Biden has made getting as many Americans as possible vaccinated. That's one of his goals. He's hitting some resistance from that. But, with Andrew Cuomo, his spokesperson saying avoiding the health experts, he avoided the health experts when he took people from hospitals, seniors from hospitals, and put them in nursing homes and refused to let the nursing home test them for COVID-19. He essentially said, you cannot deny this person entry into the nursing home based upon a positive COVID-19 test. That was one of the reasons why New York had such a high percentage of people in nursing homes dying. And then Andrew Cuomo went on to not fully account for all those people. The Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, we talked about her a little earlier in her suit against the National Rifle Association, but she is doing some looking into this and feel like there may be an undercount of 1,000 at least, or maybe several thousand people who died of COVID-19 based upon that ruling. But that was Governor Cuomo just before the election. In addition, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi warned, this is before the election, and I'm quoting from her, unless there is confidence that the vaccine has gone through the clinical trials and then is approved by the Independent Scientific Advisory Committee as established to do just this, there will be doubts that people will have. That was her talking about the vaccine prior to the election. And CNN's Dana Bash asked vice presidential candidate at the time, Kamala Harris, last September if she would get the vaccine. Harris replied, well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us. And then President Joe Biden, then a presidential candidate, raised questions about whether or not he would take the vaccine, and only if it was going to be based upon science and it was going to go through the science. Just for his own information, it was the scientist who developed and processed and released the vaccine. It was not President Trump. So you get the sense that the media just simply will not highlight some of these concerns that were going on. Now, you can be concerned about the vaccine either after it was released or before it was released, but my point here is the media are focusing on conservatives now who are raising questions about it. Some of them may be legitimate questions. I'm not getting into that, but they are raising questions about some aspects of this. So it's fair to do that. It's fair to critique it, but they never seem to critique what was happening before the election when major Democrats were speaking out against the vaccine, about the speed with which it was being processed and developed, whether or not it was being done for political purposes, whether or not you could trust a vaccine that was being developed under the Trump administration, even though it was private sector companies, primarily for us, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson, in England, AstraZeneca. Those vaccines were moving along, but you couldn't trust the Democrats said they just didn't feel like they were sure they could trust that vaccine, and that fed into the anti-vaccination concerns that people have even now. So I wanted to point this out because it is a problem and the media simply won't acknowledge it. So I wanted to highlight that. You can probably find that a little later today at ipi.org. You can go there. All of our information is available there. Stay with us. We'll be back for our final segment on Point of View in just a minute.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to our final segment of Point of View. I checked over the break with the help of Steve Miller, and our piece is up on IPI.org. That's Institute for Policy Innovation.org, IPI.org. You go there and you'll see the piece that just got up. Where was the media's pre-pandemic concern about vaccine politicization? Because it was being politicized, the vaccine, even then. It's just that the media were not terribly concerned about it. Incidentally, if you go to IPI.org, you'll also see that we are advertising a Zoom call we have coming up, a Zoom webinar later this week on Wednesday afternoon with Brian Westbury, an economist who was with the Bush administration. And we're going to talk to him about some of the economic challenges the country's facing right now. So here's where we are, as far as I can tell, on the infrastructure bill. They're trying to make progress to get this thing through. There's been some pushback. I understand today that some of the Republicans who had said they were willing to sign on are having second thoughts about that. Bernie Sanders, who is chairman of the Senate Budget Committee and is trying to put forth a budget, was in debates with people about how big the budget was going to be. They were apparently circling around $3.5 trillion or so. Bernie wants it to be significantly more than that. I mean, it is amazing we've got a Democratic socialist, that's his affiliation, who is not even a registered Democrat handling the Democratic Senate Budget Committee, but that's the case. Bernie has always wanted to spend as much money as possible. The real sticking point has been, how do you pay for it? And some of those Republicans are backing off a little bit because they haven't got a way to pay for this bill yet. They've come up with several options. Most of those are likely going to be not going to be scored by the Congressional Budget Office as something that will actually do any good or actually bring in much money. I've seen that today one of President Biden's way of paying for this is trying to make sure, giving a lot more money to the IRS so that they can go and hire more agents and especially go after wealthier people to make sure they're paying all the money they're supposed to be paying. But we don't really have a lot. We've got laws. If those wealthy people are breaking the laws, you can go after them now. You don't have to wait and hire more IRS people. So there's concern that will not even show up as a major funding revenue stream for the infrastructure bill, the second infrastructure bill, the larger reconciliation bill. So we don't know where that's going to go. Bernie said a few weeks ago that he was for just financing the whole thing, essentially just borrowing all the money and not even worrying about the taxes, because he doesn't want that to be a sticking point in his efforts to try to get as much spending done as possible. And then, of course, if we essentially borrow all the money, does that raise interest rates? Are there enough countries or individuals or companies who are willing to finance all that? We just don't know. But he wants to get it back up to, I think, $5 or $6 trillion, whereas they were trying to come down to around $3. I have to shake myself every now and then when I think we're really $3.5 trillion is the conservative end of the spending that they're wanting to do out there on the second reconciliation bill. So we're not sure that they're going to be able to get the original infrastructure bill passed. That was the one that was toned down a good bit to about $1 trillion, more or less. There are Republicans who are having some concerns about that, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer wanted to try to have that finished by this month in July. Don't know we'll be able to get there. If they don't get it done, we've heard that the leadership has said they may be staying in August if they don't have some of these things finished up, because they want to be able to vote on them and get them passed, at least the original infrastructure bill, through the Senate by the end of this month, and have the rest of the things passed early next month. The fiscal year for the federal government runs from September 30th to October 1st to September 30th. So the new fiscal year for 2022 begins October 1st. Are they going to be able to get that done? I think it's possible, but they have concerns with everything they've got going on, including Senator Sinema from Arizona and Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Those are two Democrats who are reluctant to break the filibuster, who are willing to vote for some of these things, but not as much as possible. And so I think we're going to still have some struggles for a little while. They have the votes to be able, to be able to get it through if they're able to get every Democrat in the Senate on board. Nancy Pelosi probably can get her Democrats in the House to support it, but they'll have to get every senator in the Senate on board, every Democratic senator on board, and then be able to get Vice President Kamala Harris, since they only have 50 Democrats, to come in and break the tie, and that will get the legislation passed through reconciliation, where they can avoid the filibuster. But the filibuster is still an issue. The Texas Democrats who have left to go to Washington on 2 private jets, staying in nice poshy hotels, are there lobbying to try to put pressure on President Biden to go along with breaking the filibuster, so that they can get their voting rights legislation done. Through essentially with a majority vote. without having to go through reconciliation. They can't do reconciliation on the voting bill anyway. So they're trying to put pressure on that, and so there's going to be a lot of pressure, and we don't know how this is going to come out. Interestingly, Joe Biden, who ran as a moderate, has acted much more of a leftist, far leftist and progressive, and his proposal so far has been reluctant to break the filibuster. That's not something he wants to do because it's a tradition of the Senate, and he was in the Senate for years and years. It's going to be, but the other thing they know that's going to happen, if they can't get this done by, say, October or November, then people's eyes start looking at the next election. All of the poll watchers are looking at this saying, it looks like Democrats are going to take a beating in the House, maybe even the Senate, come the next election. So if they do that and the House flips to Republican and possibly the Senate flips to Republican, then they've got a situation where they can't get anything done. So they feel like they've got 1 year, or actually just a few more months, this initial year of Joe Biden's presidency, to try to get everything they want done. Ironically, given the fact that they really barely won in terms of electoral votes, they won by just a few thousand votes in 3 or 4 states. They're claiming this is a mandate and that they have to get it done if they're going to be able to secure the democracy for the country. And then you have this issue of Democrats leading, who are elected officials of the state of Texas, in a duly elected House and Senate in Texas, fleeing the state of Texas to, in essence, impede the democracy that's going on there. You can't make this stuff up, friends. You just can't make it up. Well, I thank you for joining us for Point of View. We had several good guests today with John Fund, the expert on elections, David Keene, longtime chairman of the American Conservative Union and former president of the National Rifle Association, and, of course, Brandon Judd, nearly 24 years as a Border Patrol agent, talking about the problems facing the border, the southern border that we have here, not just Texas, but also Arizona and New Mexico. We're going to have to address this, and nobody seems to be doing it, and the media simply aren't covering it. But we will cover it here on Point of View. Thank you for joining us.
Having civil conversations about important issues seems to be harder and harder. Various media outlets tell people what they should believe, why they should be outraged, and getting people to actually think, well, it can be difficult. Whether it's the gospel, tax issues, social policy, or just about anything else, you need to have solid information and clear thinking to address the hard issues. You need God's truth applied. And that's what you get in less than 2 minutes with Point of View's Viewpoints Commentary, a daily resource to help you be informed and think through the things we need to be talking about. It is free and will arrive in your inbox each day when you visit pointofview.net/signup. Sometimes we know we should say something, but we're silent because we're not quite sure what to say. Viewpoints Commentary can help you break the silence and change the narrative. It can make you a more equipped agent for truth. Get your free subscription to the Viewpoints Commentary at pointofview.net/signup. Pointofview.net/signup. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.